Before drones, before tanks, before the age of steel and oil, there were men, flesh and blood, yet feared like storms. Names whispered around campfires, curses muttered in hospitals, prayers carved into the silence of men who knew they might meet them on the field. This is their story. The American Civil War was not just brother against brother. It was the clash of titans. A war of 620,000 dead, where generals became more than men. They became shadows in the smoke. Wolves on horseback, butchers and saviors. Some inspired terror through sheer brutality. Others through brilliance, the kind that made an enemy know, before the battle even began, that he was already defeated. Today, we walk the battlefield ghosts of 10 men, the most feared generals of America's darkest war. Fear in war is not born in numbers. It is not born in bullets. It is born in legends. From Virginia to Mississippi, from muddy rivers to burning cities, these generals carved themselves into history not with words, but with fire. Each man's origin was different. A scholar turned killer, a priest's son turned cavalry raider, a mild professor of mathematics who became the South's most terrifying war god. We begin with him, Thomas Jonathan Jackson. To his students at Virginia Military Institute, he was quiet, awkward, almost laughable. But in 1861, at Bull Run, he stood unmoving as bullets and shells tore through the air. A fellow officer shouted, "Look, there is Jackson, standing like a stone wall." Stonewall Jackson was born in that moment. And with him, fear. Jackson's men marched 30 miles in a day, hit like thunder, then vanished into the mist. He carried no mercy, no hesitation. To his enemies, he was a phantom. To his men, he was a god. Fear took many forms. For Union soldiers, the name Nathan Bedford Forrest carried a special kind of dread. He was called that Devil Forrest, a cavalry commander who fought with reckless violence, wielding pistols and sabers with a fury that made him as deadly as his entire brigade. Forrest killed 30 men in hand-to-hand combat and had 30 horses shot beneath him. His enemies swore he had 9 lives. His men swore he was born for slaughter. Then came William Tecumseh Sherman. Where Jackson and Forrest were feared on the battlefield, Sherman was feared by the civilian world. When he marched through Georgia and the Carolinas, he did not simply defeat armies. He burned fields, railroads, homes. He declared that war is cruelty and you cannot refine it. To the South, he was a demon, proof that even if your sons survived the battlefield, your home might not survive his march. But fear is not always hatred. Many soldiers on both sides feared Robert E. Lee, not because of brutality, but because of brilliance. Lee inspired a different terror, the knowledge that no matter how many men or cannons the Union brought, his cunning could undo them. Even in defeat, Lee was revered, a knightly figure who made war feel like destiny. On the Union side, fear had another face, Ulysses S. Grant. Not flamboyant, not elegant, but relentless. Grant was the general who would not stop. When others retreated, he pressed forward. When others counted their dead, he counted miles gained. Miles gained. Lee's men feared Grant not for what he was, but because he seemed inevitable, a silent tide that could not be turned back. And in this grim theater, there were more. George Armstrong Custer, a cavalry thunderbolt, reckless and dazzling, who seemed to live for the charge. John Bell Hood, who threw his men into slaughter with such ferocity that even his allies feared his command. Ambrose Burnside, remembered not for glory but for a disastrous assault at Fredericksburg, where Union soldiers whispered his name like a curse. Each general, a different kind of fear. Death, brilliance, futility. But fear cannot hold forever. Stonewall Jackson was cut down not by Union guns, but by his own men's fire in the night. Forrest lived to old age, but haunted by blood and by the birth of infamy after the war. Sherman walked away victorious, yet spent the rest of his life defending the cruelty of his march. Custer rode west, only to find his end surrounded at Little Bighorn. The war ended. The generals died. The fear they once commanded faded into textbooks, then into memory. But the earth remembers. The rivers remember. The soldiers who marched under their banners, and those who never came home, they remember. Today, the names remain carved into statues, streets, history books. Yet their legacy is contested, their reputations torn between honor and horror. What does it mean to be feared? To burn your enemy's crops until children starve? To inspire courage in your men, but despair in your foes? To lead thousands to death, knowing it will make you immortal? The American Civil War teaches us this. Fear is as much a weapon as any rifle or cannon. And the generals who wielded it left scars not only on the land, but on the very soul of America. Before tanks, before bombs, before drones, there were men whose names became nightmares. Jackson, Forrest, Sherman, Lee, Grant, and others, 10 shadows in the fire of America's most tragic war. If this journey into forgotten fear moved you, let history know you were here. Leave a like, share this story, and subscribe for more legends of blood and memory. Because as always, history is not dead. It waits, like a shadow, until we remember.